Hello, I'm Giulia Valentini and you're listening to Scene World Podcast.
So, welcome to the Scene World Podcast.
It's the Scene World Podcast. It's us. You know who
Awesome. So, in a minute, we will talk to Modern Vintage Gamer, aka Dimitris Giannakis.
Yes,
Awesome.
You will be talking to him. I don't believe that I was there.
Yes, me and. Oh, wait a second. Oh shit. Okay, me. We will cut that out.
Yes.
Me and Dennis actually did.
Yes.
Dennis was there. No. Yes.
So somebody that was not me was there.
Yeah. It was me and Dennis. So we will talk to him in a minute. But before that, some news. Well, so news number 1. Okay. So Louis Rossmann, the repair guy, who does a lot of YouTube videos, actually made a YouTube video recently.
Oh, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, how the governor sabotaged.
Sabotaged.
Yeah. Okay. Louis Rossmann did a YouTube video recently about the governor who sabotaged
Sabotage.
the repair bill in New York. What?
Sabotage.
Sabotaged.
Sabotage is I don't know what that is, but it's sabotage.
Sabotage? Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So third time.
Yeah.
Louis Rossmann, who is known for doing Apple repairs.
Yes.
Recently did a YouTube video about the governor of New York City sabotaged the right to repair bill by making it effectless, I would say.
Yes.
So we'll link to that. And next to that also, Nintendo of Germany is hiring. They are at the moment looking for a junior social media specialist. So we will link to the job portal of Nintendo.
It's actually, it's interesting too, because the governor of New York is Kathy Hochul, who is a Democrat and would normally be for right to repair. Like that's it's an odd, it's a strange person to sabotage that.
Oh, okay. Well, luckily I can switch the sentences. Anyway, next to that, we had Matri as a guest a while ago, and they actually had been at the red carpet on the SPS Drama Awards. There's a YouTube shorts about that. We will link to that. So our most famous guests are going high stages.
I wasn't even there.
Right. And the next thing that actually I found out today, there has been Metal Slug released for the Mega Drive and for the Atari STE.
Okay.
And on the HIO pages, they actually write they are planning a physical Mega Drive / Genesis release. So
okay.
That's something.
That's the thing, yes.
Yeah. And last but not least, ForeverClassics.com released an article about Games of Excellence 2022. That's also nice.
Mm-hmm.
And David Plessens released
yes.
a German announcements about the German book release.
Right.
Towards those who ordered his book translation. So we will link to that as well. So if you pre-ordered his German book, you should check that out because he wrote some important infos about that regarding shipping address and so on.
Indeed.
Yeah, well, and also last Saturday, our staffer and PR assistant.
I was wondering if you were gonna bring that up.
Yeah, sure. Dennis Karimani, aka Remute, had a concert on the DRP, the Digital Retro Park, the museum in Offenbach, Germany, who we also had a virtual museum tour a while ago with at the beginning of the pandemic in April 20.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did. It was awesome.
Yeah, so that was almost 3 years ago.
Speaking of which, Falk Heisenberg, who was
Heinzelmann.
Yes. What's the name?
Falk Heinzelmann.
Falk Heinzelmann, who was one of our tour guides for the Digital Retro Park, recently had a heart attack. But
I know, I called him today, yeah. But he's doing fine, and he's actually on the road to recovery.
Yes, but
I called him earlier today. Yeah.
I just wanted to give him a shout out because he was awesome on the podcast, and I saw, the social media post about it, and.
Whoa, yeah. Well,
But
luckily
anyway.
I'm still fine, still here. So.
Yeah.
And he is also here. He is just on the road to recovery. I had a phone call with him today before we do this recording now and asked him like, hey, Falk, how are you doing? How is your possibility of staying alive? And he said, yeah, he's doing well. And he's working.
Yeah. Hey, you gonna stay alive?
Yeah.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're talking about Remute. Talking about Dennis.
Yeah, well, that was it. He had the concert, and there is a recording of the concert to which we will link.
Beautiful. Were you there?
Yes.
Nice.
First appointment this year.
Nice.
I mean,
Dennis is awesome. I've got so much Dennis stuff right back there.
Right. Me too.
I'm a colleague and a fan.
Yeah. Yeah, actually got some stuff from him too. But the thing is, some things are not easy to get anymore, or let's say impossible.
Yeah.
Because they are sold out.
Yeah. Well, there was the last thing he did came with balloons, and there was a limited number of balloons that he could send. So I fortunately managed to get one of the, I think it was probably one of the last batches that actually had a couple balloons in it.
Nice.
So
okay.
But yeah, I mean, there are finite supplies for that stuff. So
yeah. And Mikey LD actually released his album for the Sega Genesis, which is called Mega Drive and the rest of the world. Yes, he released that album for the first time on MC, on music cassette.
I wonder why they called it the Sega Genesis, because
it was originally on the Genesis, but then decided to make a cassette version as well.
No. I said I wonder why Sega decided to call it the Genesis.
Because there was a different machine with the same name, Mega Drive, in USA.
Yeah, but
at that time already.
Genesis usually means the beginning of something, and you would think like
it was the beginning.
Earlier, but it wasn't. Well, the beginning was like Sega consoles.
It was the beginning of their 16-bit era.
Yeah.
For the home consoles, and that is how they named it like that.
I think that's a cheesy. I think it's a crappy name for a console. Mega Drive sounds much cooler.
Well, what should they have called it in USA?
I don't know.
Gigantic Drive?
Yeah, or just the
Huge Drive?
The Sega Blast processor.
Blast processing. Yeah, we discussed that a couple of times already.
Hell, I'd buy the
blast. Marketing thing that everybody thought was just a gag, then we later found out blast processing is actually a thing the Mega Drive can do.
I'd buy a thing called the Blast processor. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. That is probably why they called the graphic mode, the special graphic mode, blast processing. I don't know. But anyway, the interesting thing about this is, I mean, we linked to that a couple of times already, to that video. The thing is, to this day, many people don't know still that blast processing is actually a thing. Before the internet, people thought it was a marketing jargon.
Yeah, just a buzzword.
Yeah, just a buzzword for marketing. And then people were shocked and they're like, wow, it's actually a thing. They didn't lie about that. But there's only one tech demo and a Sonic game that actually uses this.
Oh, so nothing really uses that mode.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's barely usable, but why not?
But it exists.
But it exists, yeah. You know. Yeah. Well, I guess we will link to that video a second time so people can check it out again in case they missed the other intro of the other podcast where we mentioned it.
Right.
We also mentioned it in our first retro panel where Richard Löwenstein was like, blast processing? Because he also thought like that was a joke I did. Like, no. I later told him, that's not a joke. It's actually a thing. Really? I'm like, yeah, seriously. I wouldn't lie about that.
Speaking of Richard Löwenstein, I've seen some updates on the reshoot R Proxima that are coming out. He's and he posted some videos on working on a new boss, and it looks pretty
awesome.
Pretty bitchin'.
Awesome. So you see, many news to check out.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, and now
I guess I had more stuff in my head than I thought.
Yeah, and now let's move to the modern vintage gamer, Dimitris. Yay! Awesome. Today we have another podcast guest, as all podcasts, and this time I'm actually not alone. Dennis is with us today.
Hi.
And we are talking to Dimitris Giannakis, a modern vintage gamer. Hello, Dimitris. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Jorg. It's great to be here. I know that's a mouthful, so you said it well, but it's great to be here. It's great to be with you guys.
Well, the thing is, I wanted since years to talk to you, so I'm very happy you agreed. I mean, I followed you since ages. I mean, you are around since 2007.
Yes, it's a long time. I created the channel back in 2007, and it's one of those things where I didn't really do anything with it. I was uploading kind of just random videos and things, and I only really got serious about YouTube like in 2016 or 2017. But before that, it was just I kind of was messing around with it. I wasn't really doing anything serious with it. But yeah, I've been on the platform for a very, very long time. Very long time.
How did you get involved into computers and stuff?
That's a good question. I mean, initially it was something that was a new discovery for me, we'll say. So, for your audience and for you guys, I'm a middle-aged man. I'm nearly 50, so I turn 50 next year. So, as far as my kind of origin story about computers was, I grew up, with the Commodore 64 and the VIC-20 in the 80s. So my dad brought home a VIC-20 sometime in the 80s, probably 83, 84 or something like that. And everything just kind of went from there. I was very much fascinated by this little box with some keys on it, and I remember when he brought it home, it was interesting because it came with this manual, and the manual had these little programs that you could start typing out to learn how to code on, and that's kind of where it all started from me. That's kind of the origins, and then from the VIC-20, you move to the C64, of course, and then I remember my brother and I wanted to get an Amiga when that came out, so we were able to pull enough money together to get an Amiga 1000 in like 1988 or something, and it's really just been from there, Jorg. It's just been constant love and passion about computers, just both from a video games perspective and also from a development perspective about, how to program on these things. And it's just been, an ongoing journey. And, I think that's probably the best way to describe it for me.
So you've grown up surrounded by computers. It's all your life.
Yeah. I still am, by the way. I never gave it up. I as you get older, you kind of try to explore the computers that you didn't look into when you were growing up because either you couldn't afford them or they weren't available. So I've just got this fascination with old computers in general.
Nice.
What I like is your series ideas you put on YouTube. For example, the impossible ports. I mean, I'm not a coder myself. I only understand half of what you are saying, but the way you present it, it's already entertaining enough for me. And I'm like, okay, there was a Doom prototype for the GBA. I'm like, wow, okay, didn't even know. Or another series where you present failed copy protection and stuff. I was like, oh my god, it's you're pretty unique in those content things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, look, YouTube is an interesting platform to be on because there are a lot of creators out there that do amazing things, and I think I made a conscious decision and effort to talk about things that are a little over here, a little darker or more underground, we'll say, So stories about copy protection and security, console security, and even the impossible port stuff is, I feel like it's an area where it's very interesting to myself, and I think a lot of people, want to hear about those stories about either copy protection hardware, impossible ports, and for me, it's like I want to educate people as well and tell them about these types of stories because I think they're just as important as the actual game or the actual piece of hardware. Everything has a story behind it, and for me, I wanted to kind of dive into those types of topics because I find them very interesting, and it seems like my audience likes that stuff as well. So I think it's a good thing.
Definitely a perfect mix between, let's say, some geeky stuff and some popular stuff, and I really like the balance in the YouTube channel. So it's entertaining and educating. Very good.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate the feedback. And look, for me, one of the things I really like to do with my content is I don't want to make it too technical. So people kind of don't understand what I'm talking about, right? So I try to keep it. I mean, there's definitely some technical aspects to the content because you have to be somewhat technical, but I always am mindful of the audience, and I don't want to go too deep or too technical and kind of lose people. I want to keep it as high level as possible so people can follow along with what's going on, and I think I do a pretty good job most of the time in that regard. And it seems like a lot of people really enjoy it, so I do appreciate the kind words there.
Very good.
I mean, in this field, you also have a lot of younger YouTubers. For example, we had on the show Kelsey Lewin, who actually turned 28 this year, and she's actually researching stuff that was released before she was born.
Yes.
And I mean, she's very down to detail, but my gripe with other YouTubers is sometimes when you have the rise and fall of Sega YouTube video or so on, you have a lot of mistakes and research errors, or where the research wasn't even done properly. And this always pains me. I'm always feeling the urge to write a comment below those videos saying like, yeah, you got the facts wrong here a bit and stuff. And so I guess in your case with your content, you don't have this fear of repeating what others have done before, or perhaps making a major mistake somehow?
Mhm. Well, for me, look, I make mistakes too. There's a lot of research and things that go on to the content that I make, but there are some videos that I've done where I've clearly messed some things up, or I've said something that's incorrect, and there's always someone in the comments that will tell you that you messed this part up, and that's fine. For me, I think it's all about not only educating my audience, but also if there's something that I kind of messed up or is incorrect, then I like to take that on board, and for next time, and make sure that what I present is accurate. But like for me, Jorg, I really, one of the things I really focus on is trying to make sure that my information is correct. Like I said, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'll make an assumption about something, and it's wrong, right? But like at the end of the day, I sometimes actually turn to some of the experts, and kind of get their advice on a script that I'm working on. So, for example, if I'm working on console security, I'm going to reach out to someone that is a security researcher to help me, right? Not every video that I've done, I have consulted with someone, but most of the time I like to actually talk to someone before I present this info, because getting things right for me is very important. And when I do make mistakes, and I have made mistakes, no question, it's not always the best feeling that you've messed something up. But I will say that I haven't gotten my information so badly incorrect where I've had to start over and delete the video and start over. But usually for me, if I make an error somewhere, I've got a year wrong. So for example, if something happened in 1984, I may have said 1983 or something. So it's kind of smaller things, but I do like to try to keep the information as accurate and correct as possible, because I think it's very important.
Well, the problem also is in this field of retro gaming, you also have a lot of urban legends. And it feels like the more you repeat the urban legend, the more likely it becomes true. Let's, for example, talk about blast processing on the Mega Drive, which is actually called Genesis. For years and for centuries, people thought that blast processing was a marketing gag, actually, until somebody 7 years ago made a video where he talked about somebody, with somebody who was an expert on this blast processing thing, realizing then, for the first time on YouTube, it was actually a thing.
That's funny. I actually have an interesting story about that as well, and it's not about blast processing, but it's about an Amiga game that had copy protection, called Leander. It came out by Psygnosis. This was going back years ago. So one of the developers, John Burton, actually, you may have heard the story. He said that the copy protection on the disc, they actually had punched a hole on the media, and that was the copy protection they used. And I remember I was thinking to myself, I have this game. I have the original game, and I don't remember this ever happening. So I looked at my discs, and they were totally fine. There was no hole punched in them. So I remember I asked him about it, and I asked some other people in the Amiga community, a couple of crackers from some cracking groups back in the 80s, about this, that actually cracked the game, and none of them said that they ever remember there was a hole punched in it. And when we went back and asked John Burton about it, he said, "Well, that's what I thought, but maybe I'm not sure." So these kind of stories, it's not just from creators or whatever. Some of these stories actually come from the developers themselves, and because so much time has passed, and I'm not suggesting that he's being misleading or he's lying or anything, but what I'm saying is so much time has passed, because we're talking about 1988, 1989 era, right? So much time has passed, and you kind of just don't remember exactly, this information. So I love going back and kind of researching this stuff and really trying to, make sure that, the things that are being said are accurate. And but that was an interesting one for me, because I always believed that story. I always thought that story was true because one of the developers, at the time said it was, right? So you kind of got it from the horse's mouth, you know what I'm saying? And in the end, it was not accurate. And again, I'm not suggesting that he was lying, but it's just one of those things where, 35 years has passed, and it's like, well, it's one of those things that just came up as kind of an urban legend or a myth, and that was never really debunked.
I guess the problem will increase with the years passing by and the new the new generation of YouTubers making the research, or other people for that matter. I mean,
that's a thing.
As we are sitting here, we will probably not be doing this in 20, 30 years,
Right. Well, I mean, see, the thing is, a lot of researchers on YouTube look at Wikipedia and other outlets. I'm not saying it's Wikipedia, but these types of stories get then pushed out to various websites. So this particular story about the copy protection on Leander was actually from the Cutting Room Floor, which is a very respected website where they have lots of information about all sorts of facets of video games. And so you can see how these kind of myths kind of branch out and just become stories of truth after a while. But it's not so there's it's important, I feel like, for someone like myself or some other creators to go back and take a look at it again and reassess what was said here. And so I think it's easy for a creator to do research looking at various websites and reading magazine articles and things, because at the end of the day, we're kind of implying or assuming that is the source of truth here. But until you kind of do your own research, sometimes it may not always be accurate.
Have you done that? Have you been going over another YouTuber's research video and made your own, correcting that person?
No, I don't tend to do that. Look, I kind of respect any content creator that makes YouTube videos, even ones that maybe don't put as much time and effort into the content. I know what it's like to make videos, and it's a grind. There's always a lot of work that goes on, and I kind of respect anyone that's a creator out there. So I don't tend to take someone else's content and then tear it apart and then kind of re-upload it with corrections, because I don't really feel like that is, number one, I don't feel like my audience is really that interested in that. I think they'd just rather me do something on my own terms. And two, for me, that doesn't sound like a particularly fun video to make anyway. So I'd rather just kind of do my own thing.
Good point. So what's your normal way of approaching a topic?
Well, so I kind of have a set schedule about how I do things, and topics come from pretty much everywhere. It's not something that I sit down and have this big giant Excel spreadsheet of video topics that I want to explore. A lot of the times it just kind of comes to me in various ways. So sometimes I'll get someone that will email me or send me a message and say, you should really check out this topic. It's interesting. It's up your alley. And sometimes I'll do that. But most of the time, I like to just do what feels good to me. Like I don't really have a set, idea about what I'm doing most of the time, and with that said, I mean, I definitely do have a schedule and how I make content. And the way that I like to do things is, I like to spend a few days researching a topic first. And usually if it involves some type of hardware or some software, most of the time I actually want to have those pieces available to myself rather than, just kind of talk about something. So for example, if I'm going to talk about a Commodore 64 game that has something interesting about it, I want to make sure I have the hardware, which I do, and I want to make sure I have a copy of the game on hand as well. So I kind of want to kind of feel like I have all the pieces before I kind of dive in. So I spend a few days researching, and then I'll start writing a script for the video, depending on the topic that I'm covering. And usually I take maybe a day or two. And when I say a day, I'm not talking about a full, 8-hour work day. This is something that I like to do kind of after hours, So I'll spend a few hours, the first night researching, and then if I need to do more, I'll do some more research, and then I'll start writing a script for the video during like the middle of the week or something like that. And the script, goes through iterations. It's not always just, I type out, 5 pages of verbiage and then read that out. I like to just kind of make it pretty, it's like a draft almost, I kind of keep it as a draft because I'm always constantly adding things, or if I kind of want to talk about something and then I look at it again and I feel like it doesn't really seem that important, then I may kind of scrap that part out. But anyway, I kind of script it, and then I start to shoot B-roll, so I get the camera, the lights, all that set up, and start shooting the content for the video. And then usually, so I release a video every single Monday, local time, at least here in the US. And so normally by Saturday, I have everything I need for the video. So then I'm basically just editing at that point. I'm trying to think about how this video is going to flow, how long it's going to be, and all that stuff. And I just kind of start, editing the video. And what I normally do is I'll upload it to my channel like on a Saturday or a Sunday, and I kind of just watch it a few times and kind of take a look at it. And sometimes I'll send it to some friends as well to get their input as well. And if it feels good, most of the time it does. If it feels good, I'll release it, right? If there's any changes that need to happen, I'll go back and maybe reshoot some scene, or reshoot some B-roll, or talk about do some more audio voiceover work. But that's kind of the routine that I've had, and I've pretty much had that, like I said, since 2016, 2017, when I kind of really got serious about making videos on the platform.
Very interesting insights. So speaking of what feels good to you, let's come back to your channel title, Modern Vintage Gamer. What's your favorite vintage console, and what's your favorite modern console? That would be interesting to know.
So for me, the Commodore Amiga has always been my favorite vintage console.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of that machine. It was really the system. So before the Amiga, I mentioned I had a VIC-20 and a C64, and for the most part, I was playing games on those things, right? Like as most of us were back in those days. But when I got the Amiga, it kind of changed my world in so many ways, because when I got the Amiga, I realized that this particular machine had so much to it. It had its own personality almost. It was amazing. It was like a light bulb had turned on in my head, and it was like, well, yes, you can play games, and the games are really good, but you have all this creativity available now. You have Deluxe Paint, where you can do illustrations and art. You have tracker programs, where you can make music, right? There's also programming languages that are available to just the average person to make games. Like you've got C++ compilers, you've got Blitz Basic, you've got Amos, you've got all sorts of tools to really help you express your creativity here. And there's also emulators as well, and that's my first real experience with emulation. Was things that ran on the Amiga. None of them were fast, but they were fascinating to me. That this machine, this like little box, right, could emulate the ZX Spectrum and the C64 and the Macintosh and the IBM PC. It was amazing. And for me, I remember when I went to university, I used to do my homework on my Amiga via a PC emulator, and it ran really slow, but it was still good enough, for me to actually, work on this kind of lowly Amiga and kind of get my work done. And, for me, that was just amazing. So I've always had just amazing fondness and memories of the Amiga. And if you kind of follow the channel, every so often, I always love to go back to the Amiga because there's always something interesting and unique to talk about with that hardware.
Dragon Lair on the Amiga, how a Laserdisc game fits on diskettes.
Yes, that's right. That's one of them. I just finished that one a few weeks ago, and I had a lot of fun doing that one because I remember I bought Dragon's Lair back in 1987, and I still have my copy somewhere. It was on the video, but it's one of those games where I was again really interested in how this came to be. Because all the other versions of Dragon's Lair at the time weren't very good, and this one aimed to be a really good port of the Laserdisc original. So I always wanted to learn about how do you get a Laserdisc game on 6 floppy disks, So I reached out to the creator of the game on the Amiga, Randy Linden, who I've done videos on his work in the past, and he sat down on a Skype call just like this for an hour and just told me everything about how it all went down. And it was so interesting to me, to listen to the story about the pitch for the game, how he got the game, greenlit by Sullivan Bluth, and how he managed to rip every single frame off the Laserdisc and scan it, with a scanner onto the Amiga, and basically went from there. It was very, very interesting.
Well, I guess Dragon's Lair is one of those examples where the original is hard and good, and most conversions are hardly good.
Yeah, I mean the game is very polarizing because, look, let's be honest, it's not a particularly good game because it's basically just, if you think about video games these days, you have QuickTime events. You during gameplay, and most people don't like QuickTime events because they're kind of annoying. Dragon's Lair is kind of the ultimate QuickTime event game, the original in so many ways. And so for me, the game itself isn't particularly playable. It's not fun, but it looks amazing. And, the technical aspects of this game running on the Amiga is what's important, what's interesting to me. The game itself, it's very colorful, it's very pretty, but it's all about how this was done, versus the actual game itself.
I guess most people don't know that the original arcade version was actually run on an Amiga.
Are you sure about that?
I mean, there is a version of the game, yes. I had a friend of mine.
You're getting confused, I think, because you are correct. There was Laserdisc games that were powered by Amiga hardware. I don't think it was Dragon's Lair, though. The one that I think you're thinking about was Mad Doc McCree, or one of those games. That was definitely, you're right, there was definitely some interaction with Amiga hardware and Laserdisc games, but I don't believe Dragon's Lair was ever powered by Amiga, as far as I know, at least. Now you got me interested, so I may have to check this out.
The thing is, I had a friend of mine who unfortunately died of a brain tumor. But anyway, a few years back, perhaps 5 years back, he was at Gamescom, which is a retro event here in Germany, and not HomeCon, which is a retro event here in Germany, and he actually brought an original Laserdisc version of Dragon Lair, and he got a modified Amiga to run the original Dragon Lair Laserdisc. So it's probably something he created, but he told me that there is a version of the game running on Amiga hardware. That's at least what he told me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
unfortunately, I can't ask him anymore. But
no. I understand. I think, look, there's definitely Amiga hardware that ran in the arcades, and there was some hardware that ran laser discs. But I'm curious whether this was something that was done after the fact. I mean, I think it's very much possible to do it, but if we're talking about the original arcade cabinet of Dragon's Lair, as far as I know, at least, I don't believe Amiga was used with that hardware. But you're right, there was definitely Laserdisc based arcade hardware that was powered by Amiga. That is 100% accurate.
Well, probably something you would have to research. As I said, it's something I can't go after, unfortunately. Yeah.
Sure.
But I mean, that was often done a lot of time. I mean, no, now I forgot. There was this Tekken, for example. The arcade machine is actually a PlayStation without a disc drive. So
yeah, it's mostly a PlayStation. So I actually have a Tekken arcade PCB, and you're right. Most oh yeah, of course. Most of the chips are found in the PlayStation, but usually with arcade hardware, there's extra memory or a little bit faster processing. But you're right. The kind of underlying core, architecture of Tekken and Tekken Tag Team Tournament, Tekken 2 and Tekken 3, Soul Blade and all those games that I think it's Namco System 7 or something like that. It's all PlayStation hardware. You're absolutely right.
Of course, you are the expert. So those we already have on the show. Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's just interesting because many people don't realize it. They are like, oh, the PlayStation looks pretty damn close. Yeah, that's because that's what the game was made for. So
yeah, I mean, at the time, it wasn't just PlayStation. Dreamcast was, or Naomi hardware is very similar to the Dreamcast. Very, very similar. Before the Dreamcast, the Saturn and the Sega STV, very, very similar. So there was a lot of, overlap between home consoles and arcade hardware. And I think it was a conscious decision by these, platform makers to provide an experience in the home that resembled, mostly at least, one-to-one of the arcade experience with some cut downs, of course. But I think that was a very clever thing because, if you played Tekken, like you said, in the arcade, then you were very, very confident when you bought Tekken for the PlayStation that you'd be getting a version of that game that was pretty close to the arcade. And in some instances, especially when we talk about the Dreamcast, games like Soul Calibur, for example, you could argue that they were actually better than the arcade version as well. So it was a very smart thing that the arcade hardware makers were doing at the time.
But arcade is not a topic you cover a lot in your YouTube channel, actually.
I do it occasionally, and again, I have some arcade PCBs, and I'm into arcades as well. It's the thing about arcades is, it's an area where there is a lot of research that's involved, to make sure, and unfortunately, a lot of this documentation and doesn't really exist because arcades weren't really something that were talked about much in mainstream media, other than just this is Daytona USA or this is Street Fighter. But the kind of the underlying hardware aspects, there are sites out there that you can research and learn about it, but arcade stuff is a lot more difficult to to research and write good proper videos on.
And there are also some surprising facts I learned when I got mine machine. For example, there are a lot of 188-in-1 PCBs and so on that actually run on a Dingo Digital hardware, which is a portable emulator console.
Yes.
And some Chinese manufacturers just reuse that, put it on a PCB with a JAMA connector, and there you go. I'm like super impressed.
I've played around with some of those, and for the most part, they're fine. But one thing that really bugs me about those, those 50-in-1s or 100-in-1 boards is the sound is usually pretty bad.
Yeah.
I'm very particular when it comes to sound. you know, it has to be accurate. If it's not, then I can't play the game. Even simple sound effects. For example, one of the games that I have in my collection is I have a Ghouls and Ghosts PCB, but it's not an original PCB. It's a conversion. So basically what they did was they took a Capcom CPS-1 board, reburnt the Ghouls and Ghosts ROMs on it, and then, you know, fit them on to the PCB. But the sound is not quite right. It's close, but it's not correct. And the one that really bugs me is the noise sound effect when you know, when your character is shooting the swords, you know, and it bugs me to the point where I can't play it, you know. So I'd rather just you know, play it in via other ways, you know what I mean, like in MAME or something like that, which is in my experience, it's actually better than what I have.
Yeah, those Dingo Digital PCBs are particularly bred on Neo Geo sound emulation. Probably mostly timing issues, you know.
That's the other thing. You're right. Timing issues is another big thing as well, where, you know, the audio is just delayed a couple more frames than you remember. And look, I understand that we're getting really into you know, being as accurate as possible, and the average person doesn't even understand or doesn't even realize what's happening. They just want to play the game. But for me, it's, you know, I'm always very particular on you know, comparing those types of things with the original game.
I have a story. In 2012, I was actually in Brazil visiting some friends, and at some point we hit an arcade hall, and I was playing Street Fighter 2, and my first thought was like, this doesn't play right. And then 5 minutes later, I saw an arcade technician, and he was opening one of the cases, and it was actually a PC with MAME in it. And I was like, oh my God, of course. Of course.
Course. I mean, I've seen that before. And look, it's not really the fault of you know, the place that you're at. It's just, and you probably know this, but arcade PCBs are so expensive these days, you know. And even then they were expensive. I don't really know what's happened, but the market for arcade boards has just gone up like 300%, you know, the last few years, and it's not even worth buying these games on PCB anymore, and especially when you can't really be guaranteed that this board is going to fail, you know, 6 months after you've purchased it, especially old Capcom CPS-1 boards that are notorious for failing over time. And of course, CPS-2 has the suicide battery issue, where you can fix those these days, but, you know, a lot of people just choose to not worry about those things, and either, you know, use an emulator, or these days the Mister is something that's becoming more popular as well. So I don't blame these arcades for having MAME cabinets these days, because I get that the price of these things are very expensive.
And they have to run a business after all.
Of course.
It's either that or close down for good, you know.
Of course, yes, absolutely.
Which leads me to another question. What if you want to buy, let's say on eBay, a piece of game hardware or whatever you want to mention on the YouTube channel, and you can't find it? Like the game costs 400 euros or or $800. What are you doing? Buy it anyway for the rip-off price?
No, not usually. Usually I won't. What I'll probably do in that scenario is I'll sit on that video. I'll you know, I won't scrap the idea. I'll definitely want to pursue it, but I may just wait for something more reasonable to come up. And a good example, actually, this has happened to me before, is that this was a long time ago, kind of the earlier videos that I did, but I was able to get a hold of a Commodore 128D, so the kind of the desktop C128, but it didn't have the keyboard. now, because remember that the keyboard has that proprietary connector.
Oh yes.
So I had the system, I had the monitor, and it all worked, but I had no keyboard, right? So I was looking around to see if I could find a seller that had a keyboard, and there were a couple on eBay, and one person wanted, I think it was like $400 for one of the keyboards. Like, forget it, you know. But I put a notification on the, you know, on C128D keyboard or something, and I kind of forgot about it for about almost a year. And I don't remember what happened exactly, but I got an alert like a year later that someone was selling 2 keyboards. Both of them were untested for $75. So I bought them immediately, right? I was like, well, hopefully I can get at least one of these to work. I got both of them, and both of them worked fine. So I was able to, you know, then proceed and finish the video. So I guess the answer to that is usually I'll just wait until something else comes along. There's also been situations where I know I have a friend that has some hardware that that I could just ask, you know, to borrow. Another good one that I did recently, well, not that recently, but maybe 2 years ago now, was I did a video on Gears of War 3 running on PlayStation 3 hardware. So there was a long-standing story about how Epic Games were actually working on Gears of War 3 for both the Xbox 360 and the PS3. And a build of Gears of War 3 had surfaced on archive.org a couple of years ago, and it wouldn't run on any emulators or anything. You needed original hardware, and you actually needed a development kit that had extra memory, because the original, or the PS3 has, I believe it has 256 megabytes of RAM for its kind of data and 256 for its graphics. You needed something that had, I believe it was 1 gigabyte of RAM or something like that. And you can only find this on a specific development kit. So I asked the community if anyone out there had this dev kit, you know, and someone reached out to me and said, yes, I have one. And so they sent it to me. I made the video with the original hardware, and I sent it back. And you know, so that's definitely another option that I like to have as well. You know, in case the hardware is not available, or if it's too expensive, or there's just no way of making the video. Because at the end of the day, you know, like I said at the start, you know, if I'm going to make some content, I want to play around with I want to play around with this stuff myself, rather than just kind of tell a story and then, you know, make look at magazine articles or information that was presented elsewhere. I want to kind of look at it for myself, you know, through my own eyes, and kind of tell the story that way.
But that creates other problems: packaging, postal service, losing the stuff, almost losing the stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, those things are unreplaceable nowadays. Sometimes.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm always very careful about those things. But yes, I mean, the postal service is notorious for just, you know, damaging your package or losing it and all that stuff. So it was a gamble. It was fine, but look, with something like that, I remember I took a lot of extra care and attention to, number one, make sure it was packaged correctly, and number two, to ensure that it was, you know, insured correctly and all those things, just in case. But you're right. Sending things through the mail, has its dangers. I have another story about that where a fan or you know, someone that follows me had some interesting hardware that they wanted me to take a look at on the channel, and they basically wanted me to meet with them in person because they didn't want me to, you know, they didn't want to send it through the mail, which I totally understand. So that's something that I'm going to probably do at some point next year. You know, go out to this person's house and film and do it that way, because I definitely understand that there's some there's some hardware pieces here, like you said, Jorg, that are just irreplaceable, and a lot of people don't trust the postal service system, and I don't blame them, at all.
Interesting. So I have another question. You're doing also a lot of coding stuff for modern systems. So let's come back to the question of the modern console. So what's your favorite modern console as a fan and also as a coder? Probably would be interesting to know.
As a fan, I think the Nintendo Switch is my favorite system. It brings something unique and interesting to video games. I think when the system first came out, Nintendo was criticized for this kind of hybrid system that it did a bunch of things, but it wasn't very powerful. And then a lot of people were questioning what's the point of this. But they proved everyone wrong. I think that the hardware itself is proven now, and it for the most part it's quite good to use. And look, the games that have come out for it are quite amazing. For me, so. I think, the Switch is the system that has impressed me the most in a modern setting. As far as what my favorite to code on, so I have developed games for the PS4, PS5, Xbox Series, Nintendo Switch, and the PC. As far as what's my favorite, I would say the PlayStation 5 right now is my favorite hardware to develop on. And there's no real particular reason why I think it's the best. I just love that it has a lot of interesting and unique things that you can tap into. For example, you have the haptic feedback, you have the DualSense. There's some really cool things you can do with the SSD to speed up, loading times. And of course, the Xbox has its own SSD as well. But I also like the overall development environment that you can use on Sony platforms. I think they're very good as well, and it's just, I don't know, it's just a fun system to develop code on. I don't really have any more specifics than that. I think it's just I enjoy it. I think Sony did all the right things with the PS5 this time.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, that's the special thing about you. You are living in both worlds. Developing for the AAA systems, the current generation and the generation before, and on your YouTube you are focusing on the retro stuff. Yeah,
and for me, YouTube has always been for fun. Even though I don't want to say I'm successful on the platform, but I'm somewhat successful on
almost
YouTube,
1 million subscribers. I would call that successful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm not trying to downplay my milestones and goals and everything, but I also say that it's 700,000 these days isn't really that much. There's a lot of people that have more than 1 million subs on the platform, but what I'm getting at is YouTube's always been about for fun for me. It's never really been like a business for me, or some people will get some success and then they'll quit their full-time job and then go full-time into content creation, and that's not anything that I've ever wanted to do with the channel, because I feel like if I start making it more about business, then it becomes less fun for me overall. I've had people approach me over the years and want to, edit my videos, become my editor, or help me with scripting, or help me shoot videos and stuff. And
NordVPN.
There you go. But it's one of those things where I respectfully decline. People. There are some amazing people out there that are very talented, but I've always just wanted to do this myself and for fun. I think the day that it stops being fun for me is the day that I kind of walk away from the platform. But I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and I want to continue to do it for as long as I can. But it's never really been, like I said, more than just a side hobby. I mean, look, you can make a living on YouTube. You can make some good money as well if you go hard at it. And I guess the other thing for me is I just do one video a week, you know, and if you really want to establish yourself on this platform, then you have to release daily content almost, you know, and just kind of keep the metrics up, keep the analytics up, and keep the algorithm, you know, recommending you all the time. So I've always, you know, for me, it's always just been about fun, and but I love that, you know, a lot of people have, you know, followed my channel, subscribed, and you know, enjoyed the content over the years. I definitely don't want to downplay that, because that's the most important thing for me is you know, the audience.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I read about you, you're also coding for limited run games.
That's right. Yeah, so I ended up getting a job at Limited Run back in 2019, and it all started because they actually discovered me from my YouTube videos. So YouTube actually helped me get into the game development space. So that was a bonus. But they watched my content, and the development manager there at Limited Run reached out to me and said, "Look, you look like you're a smart guy, and you know what you're talking about. You know, would you be interested in coming to work for us? We're working on some retro games right now that we think you would really appreciate." So it kind of just went from there. I joined up with them on a contract basis initially to help them with some games that they were working on, and I've since, you know, joined the team full time, and you know, been working on mostly retro games for them. We developed a emulation platform that's called Carbon, that allows you to basically run old retro games, you know, on modern platforms, you know, irrespective of the console.
So that means we could almost do a second interview about limited run games with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there would be a lot there to talk about, but yeah, I'd be more than happy to chat with you guys about that aspect of what I do at LRG, because it's a lot of fun, you know, and it's something that I'm very passionate about as well. You know,
are you actually allowed? Isn't there NDA?
There is NDA, and I can't talk about the exact games that I'm working on. I can talk about the games that we've released, but unfortunately, I can't say what games that we have coming out next year, for example. But yeah, I'm more than happy to talk about, you know, the things that we've already done.
I mean, when I was writing to you to invite you, I was like, oh my God, this man did so much stuff. We can talk to him like 3 hours and still have something to talk about. You are so versatile, you know?
Yeah. I like to do lots of different things, you know, and but all the things I do it because I'm passionate about, you know. And for me, getting into the game industry was something that I've wanted to do for many, many years, but I never really had you know, to get into the video game industry, you either have to go to college and learn about, you know, game development, or more importantly, you have to know people in the industry. And for me, I was never really anyone that knew anyone in the industry that could vouch for me. But I knew that I was a skilled programmer, and I've been writing code for many, many years, just not in game development. And like I said, it was YouTube that kind of that was what I was, you know, what people at LRG had seen, and that's how I was discovered. So I guess, you know, the advice I would give to anyone that wants to get into the industry is do something unique, you know, and different from everyone else, because, you know, if you're just a person that submits your resume for a game development job, and there's 10 other people, then they want to see something that makes you stand out from the rest. You know what I mean? And having a YouTube channel with over 700,000 subscribers is something that is unique. You know what I mean? And I'm not suggesting that everyone has that at their disposal, but I also feel like it's not just about having a YouTube channel. If you do something unique and creative and interesting, that's a little maybe different from everyone else, then that's kind of what you want to focus on. So I never created YouTube to get into the game industry. I want to say that, but it also helped me get into the game industry. That's how I was kind of recognized. So I think it was really good for me, and I've been very, very, very happy, making games for LRG. They're a great company to work for.
I mean, a lot of times things just fall into place. I mean, we started this podcast because AJ, who is not with us today, unfortunately, he found on a thrift store, he found a microphone for $5, and he was like, "Hey, we have this brand. Why don't we expand to a podcast?" And now we are doing an interview with the Modern Vintage Gamers. So
there you go.
This is how things sometimes fall in place. But on the other hand, when I was preparing for this interview today, I had the feeling you keep a low profile, because the only other interview I found was actually with Robert Neal from Retro RGB. I don't know if that was really the only one you did before.
I've done a couple. I've talked to a couple of, I've done some podcasts. I've done the Retro Hour, if you guys follow those guys. Over in the UK.
Sure.
I've been on their show, I think, twice. But for the most part, I do keep a low profile. I think, I like to, I don't know, I just like to let the work and the videos do the talking, But I'm always happy to talk to people that want to reach out to me. But yeah, I did one with Retro RGB. I will say that out of all the podcasts I've done, that was probably my favorite one. I really enjoyed chatting with Rob. He was with Bob. Sorry, he was very, very awesome to talk to. But yeah, I do them occasionally. But like I'm not one of these people that you'll find me on a million different podcasts.
I think, Dennis, you said once Bob is like a dude.
It is. He is. Definitely.
Yeah, he's a really good guy.
Yeah.
I've met Bob a few times in person at some retro conventions here in the US, and he's a stand-up guy. Like he's always been very helpful. He's one of those people, like I was talking about, where if I need something, some retro hardware, he's one of those guys that I can reach out to, and he'll help me out. He's given me, he was one that sent me a Mister. He said, you haven't looked at this Mister stuff yet, have you? And I said, well, what's so good about the Mister? Over MAME. It's just another form of emulation, even though a lot of people don't think that FPGA is. I mean, it's hardware emulation, right? But that's another story. I don't want to get into the ins and outs of that. But
I mean, we anyway, have time. We have time.
He ended up sending me a Mister. He said, just play around with this and let me know what you think. No pressure or anything like that. So I said, all right. And so I spent a few days playing around with this Mister, and I was like, my God, this thing is incredible. Like I realized that I got into this very late, because there's people asking me about the Mister for years. When are you going to review the Mister on your channel? We want to see the Mister. Why aren't you talking about the Mister? And I just didn't feel like it was that interesting, And then he sent it to me, and I was just like, this is incredible. I didn't understand why people, I didn't understand at the time, and now I understand why people really love this stuff, because it's the community around that, especially the things that they're doing with the Mister is just amazing. When I made a video on the Mister, I think it was maybe a year ago now, but PlayStation was in development, and even then it was running quite well. I took a look at some early Sega Saturn stuff that was going on, and the Atari Jaguar had a core in there as well, which was still being developed. And it's an amazing community, and it's an amazing piece of hardware. So going back to the original point, I mean, Bob's one of those guys, that I can rely on to get me things if I need them.
Yeah, which I actually mentioned, because we invited him and you approximately at the same time, and you both agreed. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So basically, over corners, you know each other, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we know each other. quite well. Like I said, I met him a few times at some conventions. We've had beers together and all that stuff. He's a good dude.
So, is there any other YouTuber or any other person you look up to, or is your role model?
Yeah, there's a few YouTubers that I like to watch. I will say in general, and this may sound a little strange, but I tend to not watch a lot of other retro gaming content, and that's not because I don't like the content. It's just I'm kind of on YouTube doing retro content. So when I sit down, at the end of the night and I want to watch YouTube, I usually kind of switch off and watch something else. But with that said, I have some creators that I really like on the platform. Bob is one, of course, that we mentioned. I like. I also like what Dan Wood does as well. And I will say that Dan Wood's videos were one of the earliest, influences for me to get better at YouTube, because he did some really good stuff on the Amiga way back in like 2013, 2014. And I would watch his videos back then, and I was like, man, this guy's really good. I want to learn how to do stuff like this. So I always like his content. I'm a big fan of Kim Justice. If you guys follow Kim Justice,
a couple of years ago.
She's incredible. The videos that she does, I just love them. Like, she'll just do like one whole hour of like the history of Ocean Software, and I can't turn it off. It's so incredible. So I love those 1980s British video game documentaries about these obscure publishers, and things like that. I love that stuff because, like I said, guys, I was right there as a kid, reading these computer magazines, had my C64, so I definitely relate to those things. So I'm a big Kim Justice fan, and I guess I also like some of the more modern people that do modern content. Like, big fan, of course, of Digital Foundry. They do incredible work. John Linneman, especially with the DF Retro stuff that he does. He's another big influence for me and my content. I love watching the things he does with old retro games and stuff. So I think for me, they're the big ones.
Cool. I wonder, what's your gripe on the scandals the retro YouTube community had recently? If every couple of years you have the scandals. I think the latest one was with Misty Kate, crying about a picture she had to pay fines for because of using without permission and stuff. I always feel like every 5 years or so there's a new scandal going around on the YouTube retro fair. Even Kim Justice made a statement about it, first on Twitter, then on YouTube, because she was pressured to do it.
Yes.
Many people were like, tell us your point of view, do it.
Yeah, I don't really have any direct association to any of that stuff, but I did see what was going on with you're talking about Lady Decade and Top Hat Gaming Man, correct?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So look, I think what they did was not good at all, actually. And for those people that are listening to this that don't know the context, basically what happened was they ended up using some copyright image from a photographer in one of their videos known as Martin McNeil. And he basically asked them to pay him a certain amount of money for the use of his image in the video. And since then, I think they ended up paying him, but they also, as far as I know, this whole thing is not resolved, because it's kind of gotten beyond just the initial payment now, because they came out and said some things about him that potentially could damage his reputation, credibility. I may not be 100% accurate on the facts there, so I do apologize. But I understand and I know the situation. I think the situation is absolutely, unacceptable for them to have acted the way they did on this. I think it would have just been easier if they had just paid the man,
which
for his
was
photo.
500 pounds, I've read, if I'm not mistaken. So it was not even a large sum where you would say, like, I'm getting poor if I pay.
Right. So, she made that video basically attacking him and sending her audience to attack him, which, when you have a following or a platform on YouTube, you have to be very, very careful. And this is something that I think about all the time, especially when I'm on Twitter or, some social media. I have to be very careful about the things that I say, in general, because I don't want to attack other people on the platform, because I know that I have a large following and those people are going to just go over there and attack this person. And so you have a responsibility as a content creator to, you have that power and that responsibility to not do that, And so the way that she kind of responded with that video and basically said that, she couldn't afford to pay for it, and he was bullying them and all that sort of stuff was just completely unacceptable. So for me, I think I support Martin McNeil in this, and I've spoken to him as well about some other things that have happened, not that story, but yeah, it's just one of those things where like you said, every few years something happens in the retro community that really just angers a lot of people, and for me, look, I think this could have been resolved so much easier than it was. And look, now the unfortunate part about what's going on with them, Top Hat Gaming Man and Lady Decade, is they don't realize it yet, but their channel is starting to slip away. The numbers are starting to decrease because people have learned that she was not being honest about what happened, and she's not come out and ever apologized for it or ever said anything about it. They've kind of just continued to make videos in a fashion where it doesn't seem like she wants to talk about it anymore, right? But it's this big thing, this big elephant in the room, where the best thing that you could have done in the situation was apologize and pay the man, and I think neither of those things happened. She's continuing to make videos, and slowly, the numbers are falling off, and I think that's the biggest shame for them, because their platform that they currently have is starting to, slip away from them. And like I said, it could have been resolved a lot smoother and easier, but that's kind of the path they took.
I mean, the shocking thing is, everybody thought, without knowing the details that we know now, that the sum must be astronomical, like
yes.
50,000, 5,000, and then it turns out it was just 500, which is not like super expensive. I might get that fact wrong, but I guess somewhere I read that the amount he wanted as payment wasn't so huge.
No, and initially, when these things happen, initially people, will side with the YouTuber, because they'll throw out the term, fair use. I'm
okay.
using this as fair use, right? And so when she made the video, people just assumed that there was this this bully that was out there that was bullying them, into extorting them, for payment almost. That's kind of the way that she presented this, as this person is extorting us for money. And if I pay him the money, what's to say that he's not going to ask for more money, next month, right? So initially when that happened, a lot of people just kind of believe the story that's been presented to them, without any context. And until you kind of dig deeper and kind of get all the facts in front of you, you realize that story is incorrect. You know, she may have felt upset on the day that this happened because she got a copyright strike, or he got a copyright strike on his channel. And when you get a copyright strike, it can be very, very devastating. Like I said, to a creator that is doing it full time, because you're potentially, affecting their channel in such a way where they either can't upload for a while, or, their monetization may get removed, things like that. So, but ultimately, this is something that just could have been handled so much cleaner and easier. It didn't have to end up on YouTube as a public thing. It could have just been something where, that they agreed that they would pay this man his money back. And he wasn't even asking for the money back immediately, as far as I know. He just said, look, this is how much you need to pay me. But there wasn't any terms about you need to pay me in 24 hours. I think it was just, over the period of like a month or something. I don't know what the actual period was when he was requesting payment. So he wasn't even being forceful about it, and he certainly wasn't bullying them or extorting them. He was just, the man took a photograph. It's his photograph, and if you used it in video, then you pay the man the money that he's supposed to be paid. So I think ultimately it's just a very, very sad situation that was handled extremely terribly, and it's gone back to really bite those two creators on the butt, and they're the ones ultimately that are going to lose their platform as a result of this.
Another thing that happens every 4 years is that Miss Mad Lemon accuses a lot of retro YouTubers to copy her content.
Mm-hmm.
And the list is growing bigger and bigger. And actually, like 2 weeks ago, she made a statement that the situation still didn't improve, and she was referring to her video she did 4 years ago. And I really was thinking, like, oh, come on, keep it low. I mean, honestly, there's so much stuff that a lot of people do on YouTube. Can you really not accidentally at least copy somebody content?
Well, I will say I'm a good friend of Miss Mad Lemon. She's awesome, and I love her videos, and I've followed her for years and years and years. As far as what she's talking about, the situation is a little different because it's to do with the piece of music that she had wrote on Pro Tracker, and
okay. Didn't
so
know
it's
that.
not
Okay.
it's not just some content that someone took from her channel or something like that. And you're right. I mean, there is there are times where certain content can be used, but this was different because this was had to do with a piece of music. And if you listen to the copied music, it's very, very similar. So I think she came out and basically said after the Top Hat and Lady Decade thing, she basically came out and said, look, nothing has really changed. Like, this has happened to me before, and look, it's happening to someone else. And I will tell you that I've been in situations, in fact, recently, that I've had my content stolen as well. And I've actually talked to the individual, privately, and we've resolved it. So it wasn't anything that I felt like I needed to make a video exposing someone for it, but it's one of those things that happens, and it will continue to happen. And I think, for me, whether you want to air it publicly or you want to, try to resolve it personally is your decision. And it's really about how you feel at the end of the day. If you feel, like you've been wronged and you feel like you need to bring awareness to the situation, then I don't fault any creator that does that. Ultimately, I think, stealing content, all that sort of thing is definitely a thing. But I get your point as well, Jorg, about, it's YouTube, right? you know, if I make a video and I am, you know, taking a magazine scan of a photograph and using it in my video, is that really fair use, or am I basically, you know, stealing content from the magazine? There's definitely a gray area there, and I definitely understand what you're saying. But for me, you know, I like to credit every person or every corporation as best I can in my videos, and a lot of the times I reach out to the person beforehand and ask them personally, can I use your content, especially if it's another YouTuber, even if they have 50 subscribers, if they have a way for me to get a hold of them via email or Twitter, I'm going to reach out to them and ask them, you know, would it be possible to use this content? I'm going to credit you in the video and all that sort of stuff. So I try to be as best as I can about those things, because I like I said, it's happened to me, it's happened to people I know. And it's not fun. It's not fun when you see your work end up somewhere else without your knowledge. You know, I think it's something that a lot of creators, you know, have dealt with, and it's, you know, it's something that I personally, I'm not a fan of, and I want to, you know, see that improve over time.
Totally get your point. A few months back, the Nostalgia Nerd was contacting me over our Twitter before he did the pet video, and he used a lot of content we created about the pet phone, phone back then, and that was really nice, because this way I learned how YouTubers work with, you know, preparing for content, preparing for video, asking people who've spoken to the Italians before and stuff, fact checking. So it gave me a glimpse of what work is involved. And the big problem is a lot of people that watch your content don't realize how much effort you put into the final video before you can actually publish it. And it's interesting that you mentioned at the beginning of the interview that you actually sit down 2 days and send your video around and look at it again, because a lot of YouTubers tell me they don't. They can't watch their own content.
Well, I will say that I'm pretty good at reviewing my own work most of the time, but I'll be honest with you as well. There are some videos that I've made that I just can't bear to go back and watch. You know, whether I said something silly in the video, whether it was something that I just got incorrect, or whether I just didn't think I looked good in the video. I don't really know, you know, but for the most part, what I usually do is I like to review my work. You know, I'm a big fan of critiquing my own content, and I'm my biggest, you know, critique as well. You know, I like to sit down and rewatch things that I did like 2 years ago and see how they hold up. You know, and I don't know, like I always feel like the only way to get better on this platform is to critique yourself. And of course, you know, you need to get that feedback from your community and from your audience. But in order, you know, for me to get better, I like to just take a look at what I've done and see how I can improve. Like every time I make a video, I always think about what can I do better the next time around.
What I find interesting is you really appear in this interview the way I got to know you from the videos, because I thought, okay, he's very reasonable, very straight-headed man, you know. You're doing your fact checks right and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
It's nice. You even can tackle the bad questions, or well, as I said, with the scandals, the hard topics that most people would only talk about off the record. So I find that pretty charming about you, that you are so flexible and so honest.
Yeah, I don't play a character. You know, some people on YouTube play a character, and that's fine. Like I said, I don't have any issues with any creator out there. If you have a platform, you have some subscribers, and you do things on YouTube, I respect you. You know, you have your audience. The way that you do it is the way that you do it. For me, I don't play a character. I don't do things any differently. What you see on videos is the same as what you have here. If you guys and I went to get a beer after the show together, if we're all in the same location, and we sat down and had a chat, it would be the same. I don't really have anything to hide at the end of the day. I've always been this way.
Yeah, I think it's the fact that you're doing this for fun. You don't have the pressure to be a character, to be someone else, and I think that this makes this authentic way that people are enjoying, including me, of course, and I really like your channel too. So that's a perfect balance between seriousness and fun that you are representing, and yeah, this is the modern vintage gamer formula.
Exactly. And it appears that over the years, with the global climate and so on, things are getting more and more political.
Mm-hmm.
That's really something that also happened within our staff. When we were discussing, like, should we really allow Russians to consume our content, and then we have discussions about that, and then I realized, well, the average Russian is not responsible for what the president does and so on. So it's really hard sometimes, and then I'm discussing this with Dennis, and Dennis says, like, well, we have 3,000 people from Russia listening to our podcast. Why should we say we don't want this audience? So it's really difficult, and it really pains me in a way to see that even within the YouTube retro scene, there is political bullshit going on.
Of course.
It's making life so complicated.
Yeah. So maybe this is the thing that you said before, that you really have to be careful what you say on Twitter or on YouTube channel, so everything can get in the wrong light quickly, and then escalates into something terrible.
Yes, no, absolutely, and you're right. There's been a lot of drama in the retro community over the last few years, and I don't really know why that happens. But for whatever reason, there's all sorts of things that happen in that community. There's elitism, there's gatekeeping, there's just all sorts of different things that go on. And honestly, I'd rather stay out of it and just do my own thing for the most part.
I noticed that when there are retro events in USA, I think I never saw you in a panel or something where all the other YouTubers are sitting in the YouTuber panel or something.
Yeah. So I do go to conventions occasionally. I will say that I haven't gone to many of them, mostly because of COVID, especially in 2020, 2021. A lot of events were canceled, and there were some organizers that reached out to me for some retro shows and asked me if I wanted to be a guest, and I respectfully declined for the most part. And it's not because I don't want to attend. It was just something that I felt like I wasn't really ready to go back to shows quite yet. I'm not really sure how COVID affected you guys in your respectful countries, but for me in the US, as you probably read, it was pretty bad for a while, and a lot of things got shut down, a lot of lockdowns happened. Most retro events got canceled. It wasn't a good time for people. But when they started to come back, I still wasn't ready to come back to these events yet. So since then, I actually did go to one a few months ago here in the US. It's called the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. So I was there for one panel, and that was kind of the first panel that I've done since the last panel I ever did, and that was back in 2019. So it's been quite a few years since I've done these panels. But I also want to say that these retro YouTube panels where they have like 5 YouTubers on the table and they talk, honestly, it's not really something that I'm interested in, and it's not because I want the focus to be about me or anything. It's not anything to do with that. I just feel like that the questions that are being asked are the same questions that you hear all the time, like, what's your favorite YouTuber? What's your favorite video? Just kind of pretty general questions, right?
We didn't ask any of those questions. We are doing something wrong.
You're doing good. So I always want, if I'm gonna talk on a podcast, or I'm gonna talk at a convention, then I want to make sure that we're talking about something interesting. So for me, I'm not really big on those types of things. But with that said, next year I have already planned to attend a couple of events next year. So you'll probably see me, on some YouTube video at some retro event next year.
You heard it first here in the podcast. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's exactly the reason why I invite you and other guests. I want to ask different questions. Yeah. And one of my dreams would be to make my own in-person panel with guests I would want, and ask them my questions. But as I understand, yes, a lot of podcasts and a lot of panels, they are structured all the same way. And we try to make things a bit different here. I hope it worked out and it wasn't too boring for you.
No. It's been great. You guys have been awesome. I mean, I can tell that you guys you've done your homework, right? Like, there's been some other chats I've had on other podcasts where you can tell that they've looked at my page, they've looked at the last few videos, they've looked at the subscriber counts, and said, okay, yeah, let's talk, But and for me, if you're going to bring me on a podcast, then at least do some research and do, so you know who I am, and kind of don't ask me the same questions all the time, because it gets a little tedious. But no, you guys have been good. I love the questions, especially the retro community ones. Like, I'll be honest, it was out of left field, but I also appreciate that you asked that question as well.
Well, interestingly, we asked other YouTubers like Kim Justice the same questions, but those were kept off the record. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, I mean, Kim is obviously someone that is very much invested in the UK YouTube scene. I'm just a observer to what was going on. So I guess I have more of a, it's easier for me to make an opinion on a public forum, because I know that she's obviously friends with people that are in that circle. So for me, it's just like, I'm here in the US and I saw what was happening, so I'm gonna, give you my opinion. But I will also say that if I was in the UK retro scene, I wouldn't do it any different. I would still be talking to you guys on the show about it, and still tell you that I think the whole situation was just terrible.
I mean, we are called Scene World. We are not making really difference based on where somebody's coming from. We spoke to people from Japan, Venezuela, or Jamaica, and so on. So that's not really how we work. In my mind, I'm not making really a difference,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the less a person is normally a guest on a podcast, the more interesting the guest is to us. So we are not having the same guest like all the other podcasts over and over again. And I really hope that next year we can make a follow-up about the limited run games.
Yeah, no, I'd love to chat with you guys about it. There's a lot to cover there, and I'd be more than happy to sit down and walk through it. And next year's actually a good time, because we'll have some more game announcements and some more games that are coming out that I think people will like. So I think the timing is good for that.
Should we invite somebody along you, or do you want to talk to yourself about the topic?
I can probably bring another person from LRG with me as well. So we'll leave that with me. We can definitely follow up and
awesome.
And bring
pretty cool.
A couple of people on.
Perhaps on a personal note, limited run games came into picture for me because I've noticed the first time about this brand when they released limited editions that were sold out within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I was
So
like,
limited
oh my
run-
God, this is
Yeah,
like
so-
super.
That's right. So the company first started out making these like limited releases of PlayStation Vita games and things, you know, like 1,000 copies and stuff. And the demand obviously has grown because physical products, especially in the retro gaming space, is something that a lot of people love, you know, having a physical product of a game that never saw a physical release. So there's definitely a market there, you know, that they found. But these days, it's more about an open pre-order, you know, for 2 weeks, and so there's always a chance, or there's always a way for you to get the game that you want now, rather than trying to fight a website so you can get a copy of a game before the 2,000 copies, you know, end up selling out. But yeah, it's a good business model and a good place to work.
It's also a good way to invest money because the aftermarket prices $70 and more. Like, oh my God, are you serious? You know, scalpers, I think is the term.
Yes.
Also a big thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And anything in the retro community is expensive for the most part. You know, old computers, old games. You know, I mean, the market is kind of quite crazy right now. You know, and I think if anyone wants to get into the retro gaming space today, then
Too late.
I hope they have a lot of money in the bank.
Passion is an expensive thing.
You're actually one of the few. You're actually one of the few YouTubers that didn't do a video this year or in the last 2 years saying like why I stopped collecting retro games.
Well, because I never did stop, you know. And I think if I made that video, I'd be dishonest, you know, to my audience. And look, I love my audience. You know, they sometimes they're really good at knowing, you know, if I'm feeling good, if I'm not, if I'm being honest or not. So I'm not going to make a video about why I stopped collecting retro games when, you know, there's a shelf behind me full of retro games. So, you know, that's just being dishonest. So I would never make a video about that, even if it was a topic that is, you know, is quite interesting to talk about.
Clickbait.
Exactly right. I mean, I have seen people that make those videos and they haven't stopped collecting video games. They're still collecting them. So, you know, I don't have any issue with anyone making videos on YouTube, but I also feel like you have a responsibility to your audience to be honest about what your words are. You know, because there are a lot of people that follow me, that follow other creators that, you know, we're considered role models, or, you know, we're being, you know, people look up to us, you know, and I would never say something like that if it was not the case.
Do you feel like a role model yourself?
I do, but like,
whoa,
I don't take it. I don't really think about it too much. I mean, I've met people in person and that's the thing that I really love, is going to conventions and meeting with fans and followers, because you know you're stuck at home all the time and you make these videos and you wonder what does it look like out in the real world, you know. Sure, you have people that click on your videos and enjoy them and comment that they liked it, but it's not until you actually go out and meet people at conventions that you really understand how much of an impact you're having on some people. So the last event that I was at was a few months ago out in Portland at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and I met a lot of people there, and it was almost overwhelming, you know, to meet so many people that just said, "Man, I really love what you're doing, and you know, you've made my life better," and all sorts of things. You know, everyone from, you know, a person that has an entire family that watch my content, to, you know, people that are older, you know, in their 60s, that talk about nostalgia and you know, the happiness that I brought back to them when they watch my channel. It's very overwhelming and it's very humbling to me. So like I said, I try to wield that responsibility as best I can, you know, and make sure that I'm always entertaining my audience and, you know, telling them interesting and entertaining stories at the end of the day.
So hopefully you do that for another 15 years.
Oh, well, I'll tell you guys, I'm turning 50 next year. So I don't know if I can do it for 15 more years, but I will say that I'm going to continue doing YouTube until it's not fun for me anymore, you know? And I think, you know, for me, that's always been the thing with me. And that is, if something is no longer fun, then I'm going to step away and do something else. And I've always kind of lived that, you know, that philosophy in my life. I'm having a lot of fun doing YouTube. It's, you know, there's a lot of work, but it's also fun. And for me, I'm not going to step away until it stops being fun. So I'm good for at least another 5 or so years, I would say. We'll see. 15 years, maybe. I mean, I could be 65, still making videos. We'll see how it goes.
50 years. 50.
Yeah. 50 years. Oh my
Yes.
God. That would be something.
100.
Wow.
You can try it.
Oldest YouTuber.
I think maybe by then I will actually hire some help, you know, to help me out, because I think that would be very difficult to do it by myself. But no, I appreciate it, guys. Yeah, I mean, for me, I love it, and it's still fun for me. And you know, just when I think that I'm starting to run out of things to talk about, something else comes up, you know, and it's just an ongoing process. Like right now, I'm doing a review of this. I haven't done it yet. This is Vision Basic for the
Amazing.
Commodore 64, and this thing is incredible. So I can't wait to actually make a video on it. It's probably not going to come out for maybe a month or so. So right now I'm just playing around with it and learning about it.
Amazing.
You know, then the video will come at some point.
Awesome. Should we be careful when we release ours to not interfere with your release schedule on this video?
No. The way that I always, I've talked to people about this before that are doing a similar review or a similar product. I always tell people just do your own thing, you know, release it, you know. You shouldn't have to worry about what I'm doing, you know, for you guys, because at the end of the day, your audience and my audience, there may be some overlap, but you have an audience, and your audience follows you, and my audience follows me. So just because you are talking about a product that I'm talking about doesn't mean that you're going to lose views because they're watching me. Like, you know, for me, YouTube is interesting because a lot of the times it's not really about the product that you're talking about. It's about the personalities, you know. So for me, I would just say, just whenever you guys are planning on doing it, just do it.
It's actually true. Depending on the guest, the episode listening amount varies a bit, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And then, of course, you have the female bonus also as a factor, you know.
The female bonus?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have female guests in that tech field, they are more sought after.
Yeah, I think so, because I mean, women in technology are obviously a lot more difficult to find and especially talk to as well. You're right. I mean, this community, the retro gaming community, it's a male-dominated field. Let's be honest. You know, so talking to female creators, I think, is very important. And yeah, I mean, I think you're right at the end of the day.
Somehow it's also a bit sad, isn't it? It shouldn't be this way.
Agree. Yeah, there should definitely be more women in technology. I'm someone that is a big advocate for it, you know, both professionally where I work and personally what I do on YouTube. So like I said, I'm a big fan of and good friends with Miss Mad Lemon. Like I've always loved the work that she does, especially some of the hobbyist projects she does with you know, electronics, because I don't have that skill set. So I'm kind of fascinated by the work that she does there. So I'm a big fan, and you know, any way I can, you know, elevate these female creators on the platform, I'm all about it.
As long as I don't cut my throat by asking too open about your opinion, it's fine. So where can people find your stuff?
Okay, well, you can find me on YouTube at Modern Vintage Gamer. So just search for me there, you'll find me. I do one video every week on a Monday. Sometimes I'll do a midweek video, but I'm doing at least one video a week. If you want to chat with me more directly, I'm available on Twitter at Modern Vintage G. I'm usually there every single day. And that's about it. I have Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff. If you Google those, you can find me there too. But I'm not as active on those platforms as much. So Twitter and YouTube are the two places you can find me.
We will put links to everything in the podcast description anyway, so people can find you. And
Perfect.
I totally missed today's video. What came before Street Fighter? Oh my God!
Wow.
Yeah, it was a good one. You should check it out.
Gonna check it
a
out.
lot of really good nostalgia. There's probably some games in there that you are familiar with, and probably some games in there that you have never heard of before. So I spent quite a bit of time researching it.
Most people don't even know that there was something before Street Fighter 2.
That's right. That's why I made the video.
and if I remember correctly, I'm not so sure, but if I remember correctly, Street Fighter 1 was actually famous for their hilarious Japanese accent voice samples.
Yep. Yeah, and it was just
was that game, right? It was that game.
Yeah, Street Fighter 1 had the voice samples. It was also, you could only play as two characters, Ryu and Ken. So you could only pick between Japan and the US. And it wasn't great, but you could see the blueprint was there for Capcom to expand on. They took a lot of influence from older games like Karate Champ and Ya Kung Fu and some other games. And yeah, they struck gold with Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 1 was interesting. For its time, when the game came out, it was quite nice looking, but obviously, Street Fighter 2 was the game that really revolutionized the fighting game industry.
Did you also touch on the horrible UK release for the Commodore 64 compared to the better American release?
No. I didn't get
that.
I didn't get that deep, but there's probably going to be a second video on this topic because I covered everything up to everything from the first fighting game to Street Fighter 1, but I didn't cover anything between Street Fighter 1 and Street Fighter 2.
Oh.
So anything that came after Street Fighter 1 before Street Fighter 2, I didn't talk about. And I also didn't talk about the conversions of those games as well. But
here's the thing. Here's a detail a lot of people don't know. The actual release of the UK version was so bad, and they were aware of it, that when they released Street Fighter in Europe, and I know it's right because I got a copy on tape on dataset, they actually shipped the better American version on the second side of the dataset tape.
That's funny.
So they knew it was horrible. So you automatically get 2 games for the price of 1.
That's funny.
Good deal.
I know that there was some C64 games of that time where there were American versions and UK versions, and depending on the game, one was a lot better than the other. And I don't really know why that actually happened, why separate versions were developed in separate countries, but it's interesting.
So anyway, if you ever make a second part of that, it's something to consider, because
I definitely will.
It's absolutely stunning. So it's like they admit their own failure. The publisher admitted their own failure, and I think in case of Street Fighter, the reason was that the license for different regions went to different development studios.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think at the time it was, I know Capcom was involved, but I think US Gold did the English version. I don't remember, but you're right. There was different.
They did the British version, the UK version.
Different developers, did different games. I know Activision was another one. Afterburner was a game that had a really bad UK version
Same
somewhat
thing. Yeah.
somewhat better US version as well. And I think Double Dragon was the same. The C64
Same.
version was horrible, but the US version was a little better. It wasn't great by any means, but it was definitely better.
Yeah. And then you have Rampage, same deal.
Oh, Rampage,
same deal.
I didn't know that. I need to look at that. Yeah. Okay, good to know.
And interestingly, there's another story. This is game Arkanoid, right? The Commodore 64 version. There's a PAL version and an NTSC version, and they actually sold the NTSC version all across the globe, even in Germany.
I've seen that happen before in reverse. So one of the games that I'm a big fan of is Turrican by Rainbow Arts Factor 5.
Yeah.
And I live in the US, so I have box copies of Turrican 1, 2, and 3, all NTSC versions. But if you actually play the games, there's still the PAL version of the game. So they just put it on disc as PAL versions, but they still run on NTSC machines. So I've seen that happen before.
Perhaps one question about that: do you also realize when you work on those YouTube videos that now certain knowledge of the retro past is getting lost?
Yeah, I do, and it's one of the reasons why I want to, cover those types of stories. Like, some of these things just feel like they're not that important to cover, but I disagree. Like, I feel like there's so much, there's so much to really to cover on old games, and I find it fascinating to go back and talk about these things, So nothing for me is too small to cover if I think that the subject matter is important enough.
Printers, for example, is a topic that will die out because nobody's interested in the dot matrix printers from the 80s.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can't find them anymore, and I love old dot matrix printers. I don't think I'd ever use one again, but I think they're interesting.
Yeah,
I like the sound. I like
the sound too. I mean, again, there's some nostalgia there, right? Because, like, for me, dot matrix printers was when I was in university, working on coding assignments, and so I remember being in the school laboratory, printing out my homework and trying to figure out why it wasn't compiling properly or something. So I definitely have memories of those types of things.
Awesome. Oh my God, we almost hit 2 hours.
Goes
amazing.
fast.
Thanks for all these insights. It's been pretty interesting and pretty cool. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. I know we've wanted to do this for a while, but I'm glad we finally were able to all get together and chat. It was a lot of fun.
Amazing.
Thanks. I'm glad you enjoy it as well. And Merry Christmas.
Thanks for
Thank you. You as well, guys. Have a great holiday.